Princess Vela stood in the palace receiving hall, her silver skin gleaming under the twin suns streaming through crystal windows. Before her stood a human, shorter than most of her kind, with dark hair and quiet eyes that seemed to measure everything. "This is my new guardian," she asked, her voice sharp with disbelief. Her father, Emperor Kados, nodded firmly. "Edward comes highly recommended by the Galactic Council. He will protect you during these uncertain times." Vela's 4 fingers curled into fists. Across the empire, noble houses whispered of rebellion. Assassinations had claimed 2 royal cousins in recent months. She understood the need for protection, but this? "Father, he is human. They have no natural armor, no enhanced strength, no telepathic warning systems. How can he possibly guard me better than our own elite soldiers?" Edward said nothing. He simply stood at attention, his face unreadable. "The decision is final," her father said. "Edward will shadow you at all times." Vela's eyes flashed purple with anger. She turned away without acknowledging Edward, her royal robes sweeping across the marble floor. The Calvari Empire stretched across 40 star systems, a civilization built on military conquest and rigid hierarchy. Vela's people stood 8 feet tall on average, with metallic skin that could deflect minor weapons fire. They prided themselves on physical superiority. Humans, by contrast, were considered soft. Fragile. They had joined the Galactic Council only 3 generations ago, newcomers in a galaxy of ancient powers. Edward followed Vela through the sprawling palace complex, maintaining a respectful distance. She pretended he didn't exist, engaging with her tutors and advisors while he stood silently by doorways. Her best friend, Lady Mora, whispered during afternoon studies, "Is that creature truly following you everywhere?" "Father's orders," Vela muttered. The council insisted on neutral protection, given the political situation. Mora's laugh chimed like bells. "Neutral? More like useless. Look at him. He looks like a stiff wind could knock him over." Edward's expression never changed, but Vela noticed his eyes constantly moving, scanning windows, doorways, and the faces of everyone who approached. It unsettled her more than she wanted to admit. That evening, Vela attended a diplomatic reception in the Grand Hall. Representatives from allied houses mingled beneath floating light spheres, their conversations a careful dance of politics and power. Edward stood behind her right shoulder, hands clasped behind his back. Lord Tannix, a powerful general, approached with a crystal goblet. "Princess, I heard your father assigned you a human guardian. How progressive." His tone dripped with mockery. "A temporary arrangement," Vela replied coolly. "Of course. Though I wonder what protection such a small being could offer. Our warriors train from childhood in 17 combat forms. Humans barely survive their own gravity." Laughter rippled through nearby guests. Vela felt her skin flush deeper silver, embarrassed by association. Edward remained motionless, but Vela caught the slightest tension in his jaw. "The council vouched for him," she said, defending her father's choice if not Edward himself. "Vouched?" Tannix leaned closer. "Princess, politics make strange bedfellows. Don't mistake diplomacy for competence." As the general walked away, Vela glanced back at Edward. For a moment, she thought she saw something dangerous flash in his quiet eyes. Then it was gone. The next morning, Vela trained in the Royal Combat Arena, practicing with electrostaffs against sparring drones. She moved with trained precision, her long limbs flowing through attack patterns. Edward watched from the observation deck. Her combat instructor, Master Relm, called a break. "You hesitate on the 3rd rotation, Princess. An enemy would exploit that." Vela wiped silver sweat from her brow. "I know. I'll work on it. Perhaps your human guardian would like to demonstrate." Relm's suggestion brought grins from the other students training nearby. Vela felt a spike of second-hand embarrassment. That's not necessary. I insist, Realm said, gesturing to Edward. Come, human. Show us how your kind fights. Edward descended to the arena floor, his movements economical. Realm handed him a practice staff, which looked oversized in his smaller hands. Simple rules, Realm said. Land a strike, or yield. The master activated a combat drone at medium difficulty. It hung to life, multiple arms extending with padded strike points. What happened next took 7 seconds. Edward moved like water, his body shifting through angles that seemed impossible. The drone attacked. Edward wasn't there. He flowed around it, staff spinning once, and struck the drone's central processor with surgical precision. It clattered to the floor, disabled. The arena went silent. Vela stared at the deactivated drone. Master Realm picked it up, examining it. Lucky shot. Reset it, Edward said quietly. It was the first time Vela had heard him speak since their introduction. Realm's eyes narrowed. He activated a second drone, this time on advanced settings. It moved faster, attack patterns randomized. Edward defeated it in 5 seconds. Again, Realm demanded. Edward disabled 3 drones simultaneously, moving through them like smoke. His breathing never changed. When he finished, he handed the staff back to Realm and returned to his observation position without a word. The students whispered among themselves. Vela felt confused emotions swirling in her chest. Surprise, certainly. Grudging respect. But also resentment that this human had shown such skill in her training space, outperforming her. After the session, she confronted him in the hallway. Where did you learn to fight like that? Training, Edward replied simply. That's not an answer. It's the only one I can give, princess. His formality frustrated her. I don't need you to impress my instructors. Just stay out of my way and do your job. Something flickered across his face. Disappointment. It vanished before she could identify it. As you wish, he said. Vela requested an audience with her father that evening. Emperor Katos received her in his private study, surrounded by holographic star charts. Edward is disruptive, she began. Today he humiliated my combat instructor by showing off. Realm challenged him, her father said calmly. I've already received the report. Edward responded with appropriate skill. Appropriate? Father, he's drawing attention. People are talking. It makes me look weak, needing a human protector. Katos turned from his charts, his ancient eyes tired. Vela, there are forces at work you don't fully understand yet. The assassination attempts are not random. Someone within our inner circle is coordinating with enemies of the throne. Vela's breath caught. Who? If I knew, they would already be dealt with. Until we identify the traitor, Edward stays. He was chosen because he's an outsider. He has no political allegiances within our court, no house to serve, no reason to betray you. But why him specifically? Her father's expression softened. Because he's the best at what he does, daughter. Trust that if nothing else. Vela left the study unsatisfied. Trust a human she barely knew. Impossible. The Royal Ascension Ball arrived 3 days later, the social event of the season. Noble houses from across the empire gathered in the Diamond Hall, their finest members dressed in glowing ceremonial garments. Vela wore a gown of silver thread that cascaded like liquid metal. She felt beautiful, powerful, ready to navigate the political waters her station required. Edward followed in formal human attire, dark and plain compared to the splendor around him. Lord Kavros, a visiting dignitary, made a loud observation near the refreshment displays. Princess Vela brings her pet human to formal events now. How quaint. Laughter erupted from his companions. Vela's skin flushed dark with humiliation. Lady Mora touched her arm sympathetically. Ignore them. They're from the outer systems. No manners. But the comments continued throughout the evening. Whispers about the human shadow. Jokes about whether he needed a step stool to watch for threats. Questions about whether her father doubted Calvary guards so much he needed alien help. Vela endured it with practiced royal composure, but each comment burned. She caught Edward's reflection in a polished column. His face remained blank, professional. Didn't it bother him? Or was he simply too primitive to understand the insults? Midway through the ball, Vela accepted a crystal flute of starfruit wine from a servant. She raised it to her lips. Edward's hand caught her wrist. Don't drink that. The entire conversation group went silent. Vela stared at him in shock. He had touched her, the princess, without permission, in full view of dozens of nobles. Release me, she said icily. The wine is contaminated, Edward said quietly. That's absurd. This comes from the royal cellars. Nevertheless. His grip remained gentle but firm. Vela's anger exploded. You overstep your bounds, human. Release my arm immediately. Edward let go, stepping back. Every eye in the vicinity watched. Vela could feel the weight of their judgment, their amusement. She raised the glass to her lips again, maintaining eye contact with Edward in defiance. Princess, please, he said softly. She drank. The wine tasted normal, sweet and cool. She swallowed, then held out the empty glass. Satisfied? Or do you have other paranoid delusions to share? Edward said nothing. His eyes held sadness. 10 minutes later, Vela collapsed. Her throat closed, her silver skin turned gray. Screams echoed through the diamond hall as royal physicians rushed forward. Edward caught her before she hit the floor. Vela woke in the medical wing, her body aching. Tubes connected her arms to purification systems, filtering the poison from her blood. Her father sat beside the bed. The physicians say you'll recover fully. The poison was designed to kill slowly, giving the assassin time to escape detection. How did Edward know? She whispered. He noticed the servant who delivered that specific glass. The man's hands trembled, and he avoided eye contact. Small details, but enough. Vela processed this. She had nearly died. Edward had tried to save her, and she had publicly humiliated him for it. The servant disappeared. We're searching. Her father stood. Edward is posted outside your door. He hasn't left since you fell. After her father departed, Vela stared at the ceiling. She should feel grateful. Instead, she felt foolish and angry at herself. The next day, she returned to her quarters. Edward resumed his duties without mentioning the incident. Thank you, Vela forced herself to say. Just doing my job, princess. His formal tone shouldn't have stung, but it did. That evening, her betrothed arrived at the palace. Prince Doran of House Telvax was everything Vela had been raised to expect in a partner. Tall, powerfully built, with platinum skin that denoted ancient bloodlines. Their betrothal had been arranged since childhood, a political alliance between two great houses. He greeted her in the garden pavilion with traditional warmth. Vela, you grow more radiant with each passing season. Doran, your timing is fortunate. Father will be pleased you're here during these troubled times. His eyes shifted to Edward, who stood at the garden's edge. Is this the human guardian I've heard about? A temporary precaution. Doran approached Edward, towering over him. You're relieved of duty, human. I will protect my future wife from now on. Edward looked to Vela. She hesitated, feeling a strange reluctance. Edward answers to my father's commands, not mine. Then I'll speak to the Emperor. Doran smiled confidently. Surely he'll agree that a future prince consort provides better protection than an outsider. Over the following days, Doran inserted himself into every aspect of Vela's routine. He accompanied her to state functions, trained beside her in the arena, and charmed her parents during formal dinners. Edward faded into the background, a silent shadow. Vela told herself she preferred it this way. But she noticed Edward watching Doran with unusual intensity. One night, Vela woke to sounds outside her chamber. She rose quietly, activating her door panel. The hallway was empty except for Edward, who stood studying a ventilation grate. "What are you doing?" she whispered. He turned, surprised to see her. "Security check, princess. Return to your room." In the middle of the night. Edward's jaw tightened. "I have reason to believe someone has been accessing the palace through maintenance passages. I'm investigating." Alone. Without informing palace security. "I'm not certain who to trust yet." Vela crossed her arms. "That sounds like paranoia." "That sounds like caution," Edward corrected. "Someone poisoned you at a royal ball, princess. The threat is real and internal." His intensity caught her off guard. For the first time, she truly looked at him. Not as an unwanted guardian or political inconvenience, but as someone genuinely trying to protect her. "What have you found?" she asked quietly. Edward hesitated, then gestured to the grate. "Fresh marks. Someone has been moving through these passages regularly. Recently." "Show me." "Princess, it could be dangerous." "Then you'll protect me," Vela said. "That is your job, isn't it?" Something like respect flickered in Edward's eyes. He opened the grate. The maintenance passages were narrow and dark. Vela had to crouch, while Edward moved more easily through the cramped space. He carried a small light that cast dancing shadows. "Where do these lead?" she whispered. "Everywhere. The original palace builders included them for repairs and emergencies. Most people forget they exist." They navigated through the passages for 20 minutes. Edward moved with absolute confidence, as though he had memorized the entire network. "How long have you been exploring these?" Vela asked. "Since my second night here." "That was 3 weeks ago. I map every location I'm assigned to protect. Standard protocol." They emerged into a junction where 3 passages met. Edward knelt, examining the floor with his light. Vela saw marks in the dust, footprints larger than human-sized. "Someone from your species has been using these regularly," Edward said. "And recently." A sound echoed from one passage. Edward's hand moved to a small weapon at his belt. He positioned himself between Vela and the noise. They waited in tense silence. The sound faded. "We should go back," Edward said. "I'll investigate further alone." "No," Vela surprised herself. "I want to know who's using my home's secret passages." Edward studied her face, then nodded. They pressed forward together. They discovered a hidden chamber that connected to the royal treasury wing. Inside, Vela found communication equipment, data pads with encrypted files, and a detailed map of the palace with her quarters marked in red. Her blood went cold. "This is an assassination staging area." Edward was already examining the data pads. "Whoever is using this has high-level access. These encryption keys are military grade. Can you break them?" "Given time." Edward pocketed one of the pads. "We need to leave before they return." They navigated back through the passages. When they emerged in her hallway, Vela turned to Edward. "Why didn't you tell anyone about this?" "I planned to once I had proof. Accusations without evidence are dangerous, especially when the traitor could be anyone. Even Doran." The question escaped before she could stop it. Edward's silence was answer enough. "That's ridiculous," Vela said, but uncertainty crept into her voice. Doran is my betrothed. Our houses have been allied for generations. Alliances change, Edward said quietly. Especially when thrones are at stake. You're wrong. I hope so, Princess. Back in her chambers, Vela couldn't sleep. She kept seeing that map, her quarters marked for death. And Edward, investigating alone in the dark, trying to protect her from threats she refused to acknowledge. Who was he really? The Festival of Two Suns arrived, a celebration when both of Calvar Prime's stars aligned at zenith. The entire capital transformed into a carnival of light and music. Doran escorted Vela through the festival grounds, his arm linked with hers. Edward followed at a discreet distance. You seem distracted, Doran observed. Just tired. The preparations were exhausting. They watched traditional fire dancers, ate candied star blossoms, and mingled with celebrating citizens. It should have been perfect, but Vela found herself watching Edward's reflection in polished surfaces, noticing how his eyes never stopped moving. When Doran went to greet some military officers, Lady Mora appeared at Vela's side. Your human looks especially grim tonight. Does he ever smile? I don't know, Vela realized. I heard he's been asking questions about palace security. Some of the guards find it intrusive. What kind of questions? Who has access to which areas, shift rotations, things like that. Mora lowered her voice. Some people think he's planning something. You know how humans can be. Ambitious. Vela glanced at Edward. He stood beneath a lantern tree, isolated from the celebration, watchful. On impulse, she approached him. Have you eaten? Edward looked surprised. I'm on duty, Princess. The festival comes once a year. Even guardians should experience it. She handed him a candied blossom. He accepted it hesitantly. Thank you. They stood in awkward silence. Then Vela asked, do humans celebrate festivals? We do. Different traditions, but the same spirit. Do you miss it? You're home. Edward's expression softened. Sometimes. But my duty is here. The next morning, Edward requested a private audience with Vela. They met in her study, away from listening ears. He placed the encrypted data pad on her desk. I broke the encryption. Princess, what I found is disturbing. Tell me. The conspiracy involves multiple noble houses. They plan to assassinate your father during the upcoming treaty summit, then eliminate you before you can claim the throne. With both of you gone, the succession falls into dispute. Vela's hands trembled. Who leads this conspiracy? Edward hesitated. The communications point to someone close to you. Someone with intimate knowledge of your schedule and security. Show me the evidence. He activated the pad, displaying message logs. Most were encoded with identifiers rather than names, but the coordination was clear. Then he showed her the final message. The sender's identifier matched Prince Doran's personal code. No, Vela said. This is fabricated. Someone is framing him. I considered that, Edward said carefully. But the evidence is substantial. Doran's movements correlate with key planning meetings. He arrived just as the conspiracy entered its final phase. He's my betrothed. Our union will strengthen the empire, not destroy it. Unless his house wants full control, Edward said. Think about it, Princess. If he marries you, then your father dies and you die shortly after, Doran becomes emperor as your widowed consort. Vela stood abruptly. I won't hear this. You're an outsider who doesn't understand our politics. Doran is loyal. Princess, please listen. No. You listen, Edward. I don't know what your true agenda is, but spreading lies about my betrothed crosses a line. You're dismissed from my presence. Edward's face showed pain, but he bowed. As you wish. But please, be careful. He left the data pad and departed. Vela stared at it, her mind churning with doubt and denial. Vela threw herself into wedding preparations, as if staying busy could silence her doubts. The ceremony was scheduled for 3 days after the treaty summit, a grand affair that would unite their houses. Doran was attentive and charming. He brought her gifts, spoke eloquently about their future, and demonstrated combat prowess that impressed the court. Edward maintained his distance, performing his duties with professional detachment. But Vela noticed things now. How Doran asked subtle questions about her father's security. How he encouraged her to dismiss Edward entirely. How he suggested she skip the treaty summit, claiming it would be tedious. She began to doubt her own doubts. Was Edward planting suspicions? Or was she finally seeing the truth? One evening, she confronted Doran in the garden. The treaty summit is important to father. I should attend. Of course, Doran agreed smoothly. I simply thought you might want rest. The wedding preparations are demanding. I'll manage. His eyes flickered with something she couldn't identify. Annoyance? As you wish, my dear. That night, Vela retrieved the data pad Edward had left. She spent hours reviewing the evidence, cross-referencing dates and communications. Her heart sank as patterns emerged. Edward was right. She had to warn her father. Vela rushed to her father's chambers at dawn, the data pad clutched in her hands. She found his door sealed, guards posted outside. The Emperor cannot be disturbed, they informed her. This is urgent. He left orders. No exceptions. Frustrated, Vela returned to her quarters. Edward stood in the hallway, his expression grave. They've moved up their timeline, he said without preamble. The assassination attempt is today, during the summit opening ceremony. How do you know? I intercepted a communication an hour ago. Princess, your father is in immediate danger. The guards won't let me see him. Because they're compromised, Edward said. The conspiracy runs deeper than we thought. We need to reach the summit hall before the ceremony begins. Vela made her decision. Let's go. They ran through palace corridors. Edward moved with tactical precision, avoiding main hallways and guard stations. They were nearly to the summit hall when soldiers blocked their path. Princess Vela, you're to return to your quarters, the captain said. Emperor's orders. Those aren't my father's orders, Vela said. The captain's hand moved to his weapon. I insist. Edward stepped forward. We don't have time for this. What happened next was a blur. Edward moved like lightning, disarming the captain and incapacitating 3 soldiers in seconds. He didn't kill them, just rendered them unconscious with precise strikes. Vela stared in shock. Who are you really? Later. We need to move. They ran. Behind them, alarms began to sound. They burst into the summit hall where delegates from 20 systems gathered. Emperor Cato stood at the central podium, preparing to speak. Doran stood nearby, along with the Royal Honor Guard. Father, stop! Vela shouted. All eyes turned to her. Cato's looked confused. Vela? What's the meaning of this? There's a plot to assassinate you. Today. Now. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Doran stepped forward, his expression concerned. Princess, you're clearly distraught. Let me escort you out. Stay away from her, Edward said, positioning himself between them. Doran's friendly mask slipped. The human speaks boldly for a servant. Edward has evidence, Vela said. Doran, you've been coordinating with traitors. You plan to kill my father and me, then seize the throne. This is absurd, Doran laughed, addressing the assembly. The princess has been manipulated by her human guardian. Everyone knows humans are cunning. He's clearly trying to eliminate me and claim influence over her. Several delegates nodded. The accusation sounded plausible. Kados held up his hand for silence. Vela, these are serious charges. What proof do you have? She held up the data pad. Encrypted communications linking Doran to the conspiracy. Edward decrypted them. Convenient, Doran sneered. A human presents evidence against me using skills that conveniently no one else can verify. He could have fabricated everything. The encryption keys are military grade, Edward said calmly. Specifically from House Telvac's secure channels. Doran's eyes narrowed. How would a simple human guardian know about Telvac's military encryption? Because I'm not a simple guardian, Edward said. Edward stood straighter, and something in his demeanor transformed. The quiet servant disappeared, replaced by someone commanding. My name is Edward Kane. I'm a commander in the Human Intelligence Corps, specializing in counter-conspiracy operations. I was assigned to Princess Vela 3 months ago when Galactic Intelligence intercepted communications about a plot against the Calvari throne. Shocked silence filled the hall. Vela stared at him. You've been a spy this entire time. A protector, Edward corrected. Everything I did was to keep you safe and identify the conspirators. Doran's hand moved toward his belt. Edward's weapon appeared in his hand faster. Don't. This proves nothing, Doran said, though his confidence wavered. You're an admitted infiltrator. Anything you say is suspect. Then let's test the evidence, Kados said. Give me the data pad, Vela. She handed it to her father. He activated it, reviewing the contents with his senior advisors. Minutes passed in tense silence. Finally, Kados looked up, his face hard. These communications are authentic. The encryption confirms they originated from Telvac's secure networks. Prince Doran, you are implicated in treason against the Calvari throne. Doran's expression twisted. You old fool. Your empire is dying. House Telvax would have brought strength and renewal. Instead, you cling to outdated traditions and weak alliances with inferior species. Like humans? Edward asked quietly. Especially humans, Doran spat. You're primitives playing at civilization. These primitives just exposed your entire conspiracy, Edward observed. Doran moved with shocking speed, drawing a plasma blade and lunging at Emperor Kados. Edward was faster. Edward intercepted Doran mid-strike, redirecting the plasma blade away from the Emperor. They crashed to the floor, rolling apart and coming up in combat stances. You cannot defeat me, human, Doran said. I've trained since childhood. I've fought since I could walk, Edward replied. They clashed. Doran had size and strength. Edward had speed and precision. The plasma blade swept through air where Edward had been a heartbeat before. Edward countered with strikes to weak points in Calvari anatomy, knowledge that came from extensive study. Vela watched in horror and awe. This was Edward unleashed, no longer holding back or hiding his capabilities. He moved like water and struck like lightning. Doran roared in frustration, his attacks becoming wild. Edward stayed calm, controlled. The fight ended when Edward disarmed Doran with a joint lock that forced the prince to drop his weapon. Before Doran could recover, Edward struck a nerve cluster at his neck. The huge Calvari collapsed, paralyzed. Royal guards loyal to the Emperor moved in, securing Doran with stun restraints. Edward turned to Kados and bowed. Your Majesty, I apologize for the deception. My mission required secrecy. Kados studied him. How long have humans been running intelligence operations in our empire? Only when invited by the Galactic Council to protect against specific threats, Edward said. We take our alliance seriously. Clearly. Kados looked at his daughter. Vela, did you know about this? No, she whispered. I thought he was just a guardian. I treated him terribly. Edward's expression softened. You treated me as your station required, princess. In the hours that followed, palace security arrested 17 conspirators. The plot had been extensive, involving 3 noble houses who wanted to destabilize the empire and seize power. Doran, under interrogation, revealed that the plan had been in motion for 2 years. His betrothal to Vela was arranged specifically to position him for the throne seizure. You were a target from the beginning, Edward explained to Vela in her study. They needed you alive long enough for the marriage, then you would have had an unfortunate accident. Vela sat in stunned silence. And you knew this when you arrived? We knew there was a conspiracy. We didn't know who led it or how deep it ran. My mission was to protect you while gathering evidence. Why not just tell me the truth? Edward's smile was sad. Would you have believed me 3 months ago? A human making accusations against your betrothed without proof? You would have dismissed me immediately, and the conspirators would have known we were onto them. She realized he was right. So you let me humiliate you. Mock you. Reject your help. I let you be yourself while I did my job. That drink at the ball. You saved my life. That was Doran's first attempt. He was getting impatient, trying to eliminate you before the wedding. When that failed, he accelerated the timeline for your father's assassination. Vela stood and walked to the window. I've been so blind. So arrogant. You've been young, Edward said gently. And raised in a culture that didn't prepare you to suspect those closest to you. She turned to face him. What happens now? My mission is complete. I'll file my report and return to human space unless your father requests otherwise. The thought of Edward leaving created an unexpected emptiness in her chest. Emperor Katos formally addressed the Galactic Council, thanking them for their intervention and praising Edward's service. He offered House Kane a permanent advisory position within the Calvari Court. Though I suspect Edward doesn't have a house in the way we understand it, Katos said with dry humor. Edward stood before the Emperor and Princess in the throne room. My family is modest by your standards, Your Majesty. We're not nobility. You have the nobility that matters, Katos replied. Courage, intelligence, and loyalty. The question is whether you'll stay and serve as Vela's personal security chief. A real position this time, not a cover. Edward looked at Vela. She stepped forward. I would like that. If you're willing to work for someone who spent months disrespecting you. You didn't know, Edward said. I should have tried to know. I should have seen past my prejudices. She took a breath. I'm sorry, Edward. For every dismissive word, every doubt, every time I valued appearance over substance. You deserved better. You were protecting yourself the only way you knew how, Edward said. In your position, I might have done the same. But you wouldn't have, Vela said. That's the difference between us. You saw the truth while I clung to comfortable lies. Silence stretched between them. Then Edward smiled, a real smile that transformed his usually serious face. We all have room to grow, Princess. Vela, she said. If you're staying, you should call me Vela. That wouldn't be proper. I'm ordering you. Edward's smile widened. Then I accept your order, Vela. Something warm unfurled in her chest. The following weeks brought massive changes to the Calvari Court. The conspirators were tried and sentenced. House Telvax lost its noble status, its leaders exiled to remote colonies. Vela threw herself into learning about security and intelligence, spending hours with Edward as he explained how he'd identified the threats. She discovered a whole world she'd been blind to, the subtle art of protection and investigation. You notice everything, she observed one evening as they reviewed palace security improvements. It's training, Edward said. Anyone can learn it. Teach me. So he did. Edward became her instructor in observation, threat assessment, and tactical thinking. Vela proved a quick student, her natural intelligence finding new outlets. They spent time together not as princess and servant, but as partners working toward common goals. Lady Mora commented on the change. You smile more now. Since Edward stayed. I'm learning so much, Vela replied. Is that all you're learning? Mora's knowing look made Vela flush silver. She didn't answer, but the question lingered. Her feelings toward Edward had evolved beyond respect. She valued his counsel, enjoyed his company, and felt safer with him near. More than safe. Complete. But Edward maintained perfect professional boundaries. He never presumed, never overstepped. Vela wondered if he felt anything beyond duty, or if she was inventing connection where none existed. The annual Comet Festival arrived, a celebration when the ancient traveler's comet passed near HFY Prime. Tradition held that wishes made under its light came true. Vela stood on the palace observation deck, watching the comet's brilliant tail streak across the sky. Edward stood nearby, present as always. Do humans have similar traditions? She asked. We wish on stars sometimes. First star of the evening, shooting stars, things like that. Does it work? Not literally. But the act of wishing clarifies what we truly want. That has value. Vela gazed at the comet. What would you wish for, if you believed? Edward was quiet for a long moment. That doesn't matter. It matters to me. He turned to look at her, his expression unguarded for once. I would wish that duty and desire didn't conflict. That wanting something didn't mean betraying my purpose. Her breath caught. Edward. I'm your protector, Vela. That's a sacred trust. I can't compromise it with personal feelings. What if I have the same feelings? Then we face the same conflict. She stepped closer. Or maybe we're both overthinking this. You're not a servant, Edward. You're a commander, an advisor, someone my father trusts and I have come to trust. More than trust. Vela, I'm still human. Our species, our worlds, our lives are fundamentally different. You're the one who taught me to look past surface differences to what truly matters. She took his hand. This matters, Edward. You matter to me. The comet blazed overhead, painting them both in silver light. Edward squeezed her hand gently. You matter to me too. More than I should probably admit. Then don't hide it anymore. He smiled. Is that an order, princess? Yes. He kissed her under the comet's light, and Vela felt like she was falling and flying simultaneously. 3 months later, Emperor Katos announced a new position within the Calvari government, Special Liaison to Human Affairs, a role that acknowledged the growing importance of human Calvari cooperation. Edward accepted the position, which came with a rank equivalent to Calvari nobility. House Kane was established, small but significant. His relationship with Vela was no longer secret. While some traditional nobles disapproved, most recognized that Edward had saved the empire. Opposition faded quickly. Vela stood with Edward on the palace balcony, watching twin suns set over the capital. Do you miss your old life? The missions, the secrecy. Sometimes, Edward admitted. But this is better. Building something instead of just preventing destruction. We still have challenges ahead. Rebuilding trust with allied houses, rooting out remaining conspirators, strengthening our defenses. Together, Edward said. Together, she agreed. Her father appeared in the doorway. Vela, Edward, the council is ready. They turned from the sunset to face their responsibilities. Vela no longer felt the weight of duty as a burden. With Edward beside her, it felt like purpose. She had rejected her guardian, doubted him, dismissed him. In return, he had protected her, trusted her with the truth, and shown her that strength came in many forms. The human they had all underestimated had saved an empire. More importantly, he had saved her from a life built on comfortable lies. Now they would build something better, something true. The future stretched before them, full of challenges and possibilities. Vela smiled, took Edward's hand, and walked forward into it.